Welcome to Chalk Talk. I'm Chris Love.
And I'm still John Storck.
And John, it's hard to believe, but this is my 12th season doing Chalk Talk. Now, of course, seasons for TV shows like this are one in the fall, one in the spring, but still, it's a long time we've been on the air. It's been quite a ride.
Yeah, congratulations, Chris. That is a long run. I can remember when you first started. I was much younger, much fitter, and I had more hair, I think. I can't really remember anymore. I'm getting too old.
Have you ever wondered why it's so important to be a member of U.S. Sailing? We are all U.S. Sailing, from beginners to experts, from one-design sailors to offshore cruisers, and from instructor trainers to race officials. U.S. Sailing supports all types of sailors in countless ways. Where would sailing be without instruction and safety standards? Where would we be without Learn to Sail programs? Join or renew today to support these resources and ensure sailing remains a lifetime activity for everyone. And two working arms as well. What's going on by your side there, John?
Yeah, I had a little bit of an incident during the second part of Emily and I's big road trip. I went surfing with Xander Kirkland, who many people know. And surfing with Xander in San Francisco is a little bit of a mistake. I ended up with a dislocated shoulder that needed surgery. The day before, one of his former Danish 49er training partners threw out his back. And I heard about 10 days after I was there, our boy Michael Manager went out with him, and I heard a rumor that he ended up with a bunch of stitches in his head. So if you're going to San Francisco and you know Xander, don't go surfing with him.
I'll have to remember that. Stay away from Xander Kirkland. Well, to get things started here, we need to give a quick shout out to those that made this show possible. Chalk Talk is presented by U.S. Sailing with support from Zim Sailing.
Yeah, we really would like to thank our sponsors. Chris does a great job with these shows. I'm really happy to be helping, and really happy to be helping out College Sailing and all of their supporters. Zim and U.S. Sailing do a great job. U.S. Sailing is a tremendous resource for our sport. They're working in every avenue of the sport: cruising, adult racing, learn to sail, youth racing, Olympic level stuff. They, I know people on the inside at that establishment, and they're doing a terrific job. And Zim is they're doing an awesome job as well up in Rhode Island, trying to push the sport and progress, and they're not afraid of taking new ideas and putting it out there, like the Zim 15 that we all saw this fall kind of get launched, and then this winter, they've debuted it at a couple of colleges, and it was used at the Team Race Midwinters, and so those guys are doing a great job as well, and we're really, really proud and happy to have the help of Zim and U.S. Sailing, and I'll apologize to them that I can't wear their shirt right now, but it's a pullover and I can't put a pullover on.
And John, when will you be out of that sling?
Soon. I had surgery a month. It'll be a month tomorrow that I had the surgery, but it's still a little iffy. The PT is an undetermined amount of time, but we're optimistic, and hopefully I'll be sailing the way I kind of want to sail by the end of the summer.
All right. Well, good luck to you in your recovery. We'll be checking in each and every week during the regular season, and then we'll be back again at Nationals. So be sure to check us out. You can follow us along this season by going to ussailing.org and checking out their YouTube channel, liking us on Facebook, searching for College Sailing Chalk Talk, or downloading, subscribing to us as a podcast. The Zim 15 is moving dinghy sailing forward as the first performance dinghy to hit the market in 2 decades. Designed specifically for team racing and short courses, the Zim 15 is turning heads with its sleek look and advanced systems. The carbon rig and laminated sails make the Zim 15 a light air rocket that is easily depowered as the breeze builds. The Zim 15 is the boat clubs have been asking for to attract a college and post-college sailor. We are picking this up in the middle of the season, in the middle of the year as well. When we last saw you, things were much different. It was November 19th. I had just gotten back from Match Race Nationals, where Georgetown narrowly defeated USF for the Match Race National Championship. Yale, Georgetown, and BC were nearly tied atop the Sailing World co-ed rankings, and Navy was convincingly the top seed on the women's side after winning women's ACCs at MIT. And back then, team racing was barely on anyone's mind, but in the past 4 weeks, we've really seen it starting to heat up, despite the fact that most of the bodies of water at a lot of the top schools have been completely frozen over.
This time of year is always pretty interesting. People are obviously kind of getting off to different levels of starts depending on what type of weather and climate they're practicing in or not practicing at all. But clearly, this time of year, some teams start to jump out off the page really quickly. Some are, less surprising. I think Yale, everybody probably would have predicted. They've been off to a really good start already. Along with them, BC and Stanford off to really good starts. I think those are also sort of things that are easy to predict. And then one team that is clearly headed in the right direction is Charleston. Early on in the season, they actually finished 4th at their home event, which isn't that great. And then the next weekend, they're 3rd at St. Mary's, and then they've won the last 2 weekends at the Graham Hall and the Zambecki, and those are 2 really impressive wins. So the Cougars are clearly up to good things down there in the South, and look for them to stay hot as we come down to championship season.
Yeah, we've definitely got our early season favorites here with those 4 teams you mentioned. Looking around the results from this weekend and the past few weekends, you've got some standouts. Harvard having a good finish from NISA. They're one that definitely hasn't had much on the water time so far this winter, but they're sort of, from my perspective, there's quite a bit of parity in New England right now. Harvard kind of on the same plane with Tufts, Brown, Roger Williams. Who am I forgetting? Dartmouth, yeah. And Dartmouth, all achieving sort of second-tier results behind those 4 teams. But, the team racing season is almost over. We've got one more weekend ahead of us, Easter weekend, and then straight into the conference champs. And New England only gets 4 spots. Assuming that Yale and BC continue to sail the way they do, that leaves 2 spots for these 5 teams to figure out.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. And it'll be, NISA team race champs, if we're going to talk about that in particular, that conference in particular, that regatta is always pretty wild. And it's usually really tight. There's always at least one team that'll kind of surprise you. And the teams that you think are like heavy favorites typically have more struggle during that event than you expect. Not to say they don't qualify, but they don't necessarily walk away with the event. This year in particular, I know, the Jan Fries Trophy this past weekend traditionally always held up in Boston, either at MIT or Tufts, traditionally Tufts. That was at Roger Williams this past weekend because everything in Boston is still frozen, and that is epically late. That's historically late, and so this year could be even more interesting at NISA team race champs. Because, I like to think about, like, team racing, the progression of team race skill and ability for a team kind of coming together and forming as a unit. You kind of go through 3 distinct phases. And, the first phase is nobody really has any idea what's going on. And, you don't really know how your teammates handle certain scenarios. Does this guy like to hook early, or does he like, it's all little nuances that you have no idea, right? And then the second level is you start figuring out, some of your abilities of your teammates and how to work together, but it's far from clean. And so that leaves you with a really scrappy style of team race. A lot of chippy fouls and just kind of sloppy. And then the third progression is when you really start to hone in and really smooth things out, and a team starts to get really, really good. And I have a feeling at NISA Team Race Champs this year, which is only, it's 10 days away from right now, I think we could see a lot more teams stuck in that scrappy mode, which could lead to some really, really ugly team racing, and it could lead to more surprises on the results.
And it could be really exciting, like it is every year. So I'm going to be following NISA. Any idea who's going to break out of that pack?
No, I have no idea. I think like we've already discussed, I think Yale and BC are clearly favorites to be able to get through and qualify. But like I said earlier, it's no easy task in NISA, especially when there are going to be plenty of scrappy races. Kids are going to have to be able to keep their cool. Coaches are going to have to be able to keep their cool. But as far as who could jump up to get those last two spots, Tufts is always good. I'd like to believe in my old squad, Dartmouth. I think they've got a lot of talent. Can they get organized in time with, for sure, no practice? They're not going to practice on the lake before Team Race New England. There's no doubt about that. And then all these other Boston teams. I mean, Harvard obviously just had a great showing. And one other team that I actually have noticed is, UVM had a really, really strong event this past weekend at the Zambecki. And so that's a team that has never gone to Team Race Nationals. And they, maybe more than the other teams, are actually starting to look a little more organized. And that kind of has a result to do with, I think they have 3 senior skippers, and mostly seniors starting on that team. And so, that's a team, like I said, they need less time together to be able to get back to that sort of smooth, organized style of team racing. They're going to move through the scrappy mode a lot quicker.
That's right, UVM didn't make my list. That was my mistake. So the field is wide open in NISA. Mesa has been particularly unimpressive in this early part of the season. What do you make of this?
I don't know. I mean, I think by the time we come around to nationals, the typical players, specifically St. Mary's and Georgetown, they'll have gotten their stuff together by then, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if both of those teams could land on the podium at nationals. Right now, they're clearly trying to organize themselves a little bit, and neither of them have gotten off to a bad start. But I think we were all just expecting a little more. One thing that is kind of glaring to notice is the absence of Nevin Snow. The last few events, I think he only sailed the St. Mary's team race, and I believe you were able to talk to their head coach to kind of look into why.
Yes, we did get some last-minute explanation of that. Nevin Snow, one of the best sailors in college sailing right now, apparently got a concussion during that regatta, the St. Mary's team race early in the season. He just received his clearance to go back to practice yesterday, and so he will be sailing with them the rest of the season, including qualifiers. So Georgetown will certainly be much stronger than their results show this season. And I completely agree with you. St. Mary's never fails to come up with a miraculous team race performance at the end of the season, despite what they may show early on. So looking ahead, and if you're not familiar with the new format of scheduling that just premiered last spring, like we said, team racing is wrapping up. One more regular season team race next week. Mesa as well has their team race challenge, I think they call it, where two spots in their team race qualifiers are up for grabs. So we'll see a good fight between some of the second tier Mesa teams. And then we go into championships, which happen in NISA, Mesa, and SESA, where most of the top teams are. From then we have 2 weeks in a row of fleet racing in those districts, followed by their fleet racing champs. Around the rest of ICSA, the format is a little bit different, but it basically flows the same in terms of interconferences. So, from an outsider's perspective, this can kind of be tough to follow and to predict how the lead up goes before nationals, especially with so many teams still trying to find their groove. As a coach, John, how do you prepare your team when you've got, like we're looking at, 2 more weeks before conference championships?
Yeah, it's a good question, Chris, and it's certainly a challenge. And that part of the job is certainly something I miss, and something I knew I would miss. Dealing with this sort of challenge. The biggest thing is every coach knows this, and every coach knows their team and how to tackle this problem the best. But you have to focus. You have to focus yourself, and you have to find a way to keep your team focused on what they can control. So for a lot of teams up north, they've been dealing with frozen water, right? So that's something that's totally out of their control, and they really, really have to find other things that they control. Maybe it means more classroom meetings. Maybe it means, an extra time in the gym, but, they find ways to deal with it. And as long as a coach can have their team believing that they, have a chance to do really, really well at the main event, at, conference championships, that's all the coach can do. Frozen water is something that's out of everybody's control, and so you just have to focus on what what is in your wheelhouse, and every coach is looking for ways to best prepare their team all the time, and every team is kind of under different circumstances, but it's a fun time of year, and it's certainly a challenge.
All right, and before we go, we need to nod to the rest of the college sailing events going on so far this season. That's the women. It'd be nice to give a full breakdown of all the results and all the top teams, but this time of year, it's just totally scattered. We've got basically 3 big interconferences with 3 different winners and teams all over the board. They don't come anywhere near the way we left it in the fall, where the women's rankings were topped by Navy and BC, both of whom sail their top women sailors on the co-ed team racing squad. So I think we're going to have to just check in a few weeks after we've got a few more regattas before we really have much to say about the women's side.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. I spent a lot of time on the women's circuit, and while these early season events in the spring are a lot of fun, and they're great practice, and it's awesome to see some of your old friends, it really is mostly practice, and almost all of the sailors would tell you that. Really, you look at kind of the last weekend or two of women's interconference results, and that's when you can really start seeing, okay, who's turning it on, who's looking good coming into their conference championships, and so we'll keep an eye on the women, and I'm sure they'll keep sailing hard.
All right, well, stick with us for the rest of the season. We'll keep you up to date as we move closer to the national championship. We'll also be bringing on guests, introducing topics. We still haven't solved college sailing. That was the goal for the fall. So maybe we'll get back to that at some point as well. Thanks so much for watching. See you next week.
And I'm John Storck.